The spit didn't fall right away. For one impossible second, it seemed to hover there in the stale diner air, suspended between entitlement and consequence, between cruelty and the moment cruelty finally meets something stronger. Then it landed. A wet line across Martha Cole's cheek, sliding slowly over the wrinkles time and hard work had carved into her skin, down toward the collar of her faded blue waitress uniform. And just like that, the Silver Pine Diner went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that rolls over a room before violence, before justice, before lives split in two. Before and after. At table 7, 10 men in black leather vests stopped moving at the exact same time. 10 cups of coffee sat untouched. 10 weathered faces lifted. 10 sets of eyes fixed on the rich teenager standing over a 63-year-old waitress like he'd just proven something. He hadn't. Not yet. Because Landon Pierce, 18, trust fund polished, senator's son, private school arrogance stitched into every expensive thread he wore, had no idea that behind him sat 10 Hells Angels veterans who had been protecting women like Martha for over 20 years. And in exactly 3 seconds, they were going to make his life their business. But that moment, the spit, the silence, the boots shifting under table 7, the air changing shape around him, that wasn't where this war really began. Every war starts earlier than people think. Every explosion begins with pressure no one sees building behind the walls. This one started 21 hours before Landon Pierce walked into Silver Pine Diner and chose the worst woman in Wyoming to humiliate. It started the way Martha Cole's mornings had started for the last 33 years. In darkness, in pain, in the kind of exhaustion sleep stopped fixing a decade ago. At 4:47 a.m., her eyes opened before the alarm. They always did. After enough years of survival, your body becomes its own clock. It stops asking what you want. It tells you what must be done. Martha lay still for a moment in the dark bedroom of the little white house on Birch Road, listening to the furnace cough its way through another winter dawn. The house was too small for dreams, but dreams had left years ago anyway. Now it held bills, medicine bottles, a growing boy who asked too many questions, and the framed photographs of people she'd lost one by one. Her husband Tom, her daughter Lila, the life she used to think would be bigger. Her knees screamed the moment her feet touched the floor. Arthritis, bone on bone, a private war no one tipped enough to fix. She sat on the edge of the bed until the stabbing eased into the dull throb she could work through. That was the thing about pain. If it stayed long enough, it stopped being pain. It just became routine. The kitchen smelled faintly of last night's coffee grounds and the peppermint rub she used on her hands when the joints locked up. She started the coffee first, always first. The cheap canned kind that tasted more like memory than flavor. While it brewed, she opened the fridge. Half a carton of eggs, 2 slices of bread, a little milk. Enough. It had to be enough, because payday was still 3 days away, and Eli needed lunch money for school. Her grandson's backpack was already hanging by the front door, one strap fraying where he dragged it across concrete instead of carrying it. 9 years old, sharp as glass. Too quiet for a child his age. Children who lose too much, too early, either get loud or silent. Eli had gone silent. Martha cracked eggs into the skillet, wincing as her fingers stiffened around the shell. Behind her, small footsteps. "Grandma?" His voice was thick with sleep. She turned and found Eli standing in the doorway, hair a mess, dinosaur pajama pants too short because he'd grown again. "Morning, baby. Did you sleep?" She smiled, because children ask the questions adults avoid. Enough. He nodded like he knew that meant no. He climbed into the chair at the tiny kitchen table and watched her cook. After a moment, he asked the question he always asked when the house was still too quiet. "Do you think Mom would have liked my spelling test?" The eggs hissed in the pan. Martha's chest tightened. Some wounds never scar right. "She'd have been proud of you," Martha said softly. He stared at the tabletop. "Do you think she sees me?" Martha swallowed. "Every day. A lie. Maybe. But sometimes love sounds like the lie a child needs to survive breakfast." By 5:40, Eli was dressed, fed, and halfway through a worksheet while Martha buttoned her waitress uniform. Blue polyester, silver pine stitched over the chest. 33 years of coffee stains, grease splatter, and smiles she gave away for tips. By 6:05, her old Ford Taurus coughed alive in the driveway after the third tweetito. The check engine light had been glowing so long, it felt permanent. Like another dashboard star in a life full of warning signs she couldn't afford to answer. The drive into Ash Hollow took 12 minutes. A town of 3,800 people, one highway, one gas station, 2 churches, and 1,000 secrets disguised as friendliness. The kind of town where people knew your name, your losses, and exactly how much pity to show before it became gossip. The Silver Pine Diner sat right off Route 16, red neon buzzing in the gray dawn like it had been refusing to die since the 1970s. The sign in the window still read, "Best coffee in Wyoming." It wasn't true, but it was familiar, and familiarity keeps small towns alive. A row of motorcycles already sat in the parking lot. 10 of them. Black Harleys lined up like soldiers, chrome catching the sunrise. Martha smiled before she even stepped out of the car. They were early. Again. That meant Rex was worried about her. The back door opened before she reached it. Gus Turner, owner, Vietnam veteran, 68 years old and built like a retired oak tree, held it open. "Morning, Martha." "Morning, Gus. Coffee's already on." "You trying to marry me, Gus?" He smirked. "At our age, that sounds expensive." Inside, the diner wrapped around her like muscle memory. Coffee, bacon grease, dish soap, old wood booths polished by decades of elbows and heartbreak. She moved through opening routine without thinking. Napkins filled, creamers stocked, sugar caddies straightened, counter wiped, menus aligned. By the time the sign flipped to open, the front bell jingled, and the first wave of regulars came in. Truckers, ranchers, retired couples, teachers before first period. The kind of people whose orders Martha knew better than their own children probably did. Then, at 7:14, the rumble came. Low, familiar. Thunder made of chrome and memory. The front windows vibrated softly as 10 Hells Angels riders rolled into the lot. Perfect formation. No wasted movement. No chaos. Just discipline. The lead bike belonged to Rex Iron Calloway. 62. Silver beard. Marine Corps spine. Eyes that had seen war, grief, and every version of what men became when no one stopped them early enough. He entered first, the other 9 behind him. Always table 7, always Thursdays, always the same order, always Martha. Because in 20 years, no matter who else came and went, Martha remembered every preference. Who needed decaf, who wanted extra crisp bacon, who took sugar despite pretending not to. That kind of remembering makes people feel like they exist, and Rex never forgot what it meant when someone made you feel like you existed. "Morning, boys," Martha said, coffee pot already in hand. "Morning, darlin'," Rex said. His eyes lingered a second too long enough to notice the slight stiffness in her right hand, the way she favored her knee, the shadows under her eyes. "You sleeping less again? Mind your own plate, Rex." That made the whole table laugh, but his eyes stayed serious. He'd known Martha long enough to read what she didn't say. Something was wrong. Bills. Medicine. The boy. Maybe all of it. The Hells Angels had a rule in Ash Hollow. Protect the people who still show up when life gives them every reason not to. Martha Cole was the definition of that rule. At 7:46, the black Maserati SUV slid into the parking lot. Too expensive for the town, too polished for the dust. It parked crooked across 2 spaces, like rules were for people who needed them. Rex saw it through the glass, saw the kids step out. Expensive loafers, camel coat, phone in hand. The careless confidence of someone who had never once in his life wondered how rent got paid. Rex's jaw tightened before the kid even entered, because men like that always carried the same smell. Privilege. Then the bell over the diner door rang, and Landon Pierce walked in. 18, state senator's son. Smile built from arrogance and inherited immunity. He didn't look at anyone, didn't acknowledge the room, didn't notice the 10 leather vests behind him. He slid into booth 4 by the front window and kept scrolling his phone. Martha approached with a menu. Warm smile. Same smile she gave everyone. "Morning, sweetheart. Coffee?" He glanced up. Just once. Looked at her like she was furniture. "Is it actual coffee or the usual roadside swamp water?" At table 7, Rex went still. Martha's smile never moved. "Fresh pot. 20 minutes old." "Fine. Black. And don't take forever." The words were sharp, calculated. Not anger. Hierarchy. The language of people who need others to feel small. Martha wrote it down. No reaction. Because women like Martha had learned a long time ago that dignity sometimes meant surviving disrespect without letting it into your bones. But Rex saw the tiny flicker in her eyes, the old exhaustion, the little surrender, and something ancient and dangerous shifted inside him. Not violence, not rage, recognition, because he'd seen this exact look on his mother's face in 1981, a waitress in a truck stop outside Tucson. A rich oilman's son, a coffee cup thrown in her face. No one stood up. 2 weeks later, she was gone. Pills and bourbon, and the kind of loneliness that comes from believing no one will ever stand between you and cruelty. Rex built his whole life after that, around one rule. No woman stands alone if I'm in the room. At booth 4, Landon took one sip. His face twisted. And Rex already knew. This was going to get ugly. He just didn't know yet that by tomorrow morning, the whole country would know Martha Cole's name, and Landon Pierce would wish this diner had never existed. Landon Pierce had been told yes his entire life. "Yes, sir." "Yes, Mr. Pierce. Yes, your father can make that happen. Yes, we'll hold the table. Yes, we'll waive the rules. Yes, we'll take care of it." That was the real currency of power. Not money, not status, not politics. Just the quiet certainty that the world bent before it had to be asked. So when Martha Cole returned with his plate 11 minutes later, egg whites folded, dry wheat toast, fresh berries separated on their own dish exactly as he'd requested, Landon was already irritated by something bigger than breakfast. His father. The campaign. The pressure. The phone vibrating every 3 minutes with texts from staffers, donors, prep school friends, and girls who liked his last name more than his face. He'd come into the diner already needing somewhere to put the frustration. People like Landon rarely looked inward. They looked for targets. And Martha, 63, exhausted, kind enough not to defend herself, looked like the easiest target in Wyoming. She set the plate down gently. "There you go, sweetheart." At table 7, Rex lifted his coffee cup, but didn't drink. Every man at the table had noticed the same thing. The boy's eyes. Not anger. Contempt. The look of someone who had never once considered what another person's life cost them. Landon poked at the eggs with his fork, paused, then let out a sharp breath through his nose. "This is overcooked." Martha blinked once. "I'm sorry?" "The eggs." He lifted the fork like evidence in court. "I said folded. This is practically scrambled. They're folded whites, honey, just like you asked." "No." He dropped the fork with a metallic clink. "No. This is what people make when they don't know the difference." At table 7, Boone, the broadest of the Hells Angels, muttered, "Here we go." Rex didn't answer. His eyes stayed on Martha, on her shoulders, the way they subtly tightened, the way women of her generation had learned to brace for disrespect before it fully arrived. Martha kept her voice soft. "I can have Gus remake it." Landon leaned back in the booth, one arm stretched across the vinyl like he owned the furniture. "You know what your problem is?" The room started quieting. Truckers lowered forks. A rancher at the counter turned slightly. Even the couple by the jukebox stopped talking. Because everybody in small towns knows the difference between complaint and humiliation. This had crossed over. Martha held the plate. Didn't answer. People like Landon hated silence because silence made them hear themselves. So, he kept going. "You people stop caring because this is all you'll ever do." The words landed harder than the volume, because cruelty spoken calmly always cuts deeper. At table 7, Mace, another angel, set down his mug. Rex still didn't move. Not yet. Martha's fingers tightened around the plate just enough for Rex to notice the tremor. A tremor Landon didn't even bother seeing. "I'm sorry you feel that way," she said. That made him laugh. Actually laugh. A short, ugly sound. "Feel that way? It's eggs, lady. This isn't complicated." Martha turned to take the plate back. "Fine," Landon said sharply. "But tell the cook not to ruin it this time." She walked to the kitchen, back straight, head high. Only the people who really knew her saw the pain in the way she moved. Rex saw it, and the old memory returned harder now. His mother. Jean Calloway, Route 89 truck stop, a coffee pot thrown at her by a county judge's son because the pancakes were cold. Rex had been 14, too young to stop it, too scared to say anything. He still remembered the sound of the ceramic shattering, still remembered her crying in the car after work, still remembered finding the empty pill bottle 2 weeks later. Every year after that, Rex made himself one promise. No one gets to do that again while I'm breathing. In the kitchen, Gus was already remaking the eggs. He didn't ask questions. He'd heard enough. Martha stood beside the prep counter for 1 second too long, one hand pressed flat against the stainless steel. "You okay?" Gus asked quietly. "Fine." But her voice cracked on the word, and in the dining room, every angel at table 7 heard it. Landon's phone buzzed again. A text from his father. "Stop embarrassing me tonight. Smile. Shake hands. Donors from Denver are flying in." He stared at the screen. jaw tight, that old resentment bubbling. Because for all the money, the cars, the schools, the access, Landon had spent his whole life being treated like an accessory to his father's ambition. The perfect son, the future law school candidate, the polished heir. And right now, he needed someone weaker than him to remind himself he still had control over something. That's how cruelty breeds, pain-seeking hierarchy. Martha returned. Second plate. Perfect. Steam rising. Toast golden. Fruit plated separately. She set it down. There you are. Landon cut into the eggs. Chewed. Paused. His face changed. Not because anything was wrong. Because now it wasn't about food anymore. This had become performance. Power needs an audience, and the entire Silver Pine diner was watching. This is still wrong. A few people shifted uncomfortably. At table 7, Rex's jaw locked. Martha blinked. It's exactly how you asked. He stood up. Slowly. 6'1", athletic, private trainer shoulders, tennis club confidence. And suddenly he was towering over a woman old enough to be his grandmother. "You know what?" he said. His voice dropped quieter, crueler. "I don't think you actually understand basic instructions." Martha stepped back once. Tiny movement. But Rex saw it. Every angel saw it. Predators always recognize the first retreat. "Sir," Martha said, still professional, still trying, "if you'd like, there's no charge." That's when Landon snapped. He grabbed the plate and slammed it back down on the table. Egg whites splattered across the booth. Toast slid onto the floor. The room flinched. No one spoke. Landon leaned closer, and for the first time, Martha's smile disappeared. "What kind of place is this?" he said. "How are people like you still employed?" The words hit the room harder than the plate, because everyone there knew Martha, knew she'd worked through blizzards, knew she'd taken extra shifts after her daughter died, knew she sometimes quietly paid for kids' meals when parents came up short, knew she raised Eli alone. Landon didn't know any of that. To him, she was a uniform, a function, a person reduced to a service. That was his mistake. The biggest one wasn't the spit. It was failing to realize the entire room already loved the woman he was trying to destroy. At table 7, Rex slowly stood. Not aggressive, not rushed, just final. The scrape of his chair across the tile cut through the diner like a blade. Landon turned halfway, saw the black leather, the silver beard, the row of men behind him rising one by one. 10 Hell's Angels, 10 men in their late 50s and 60s, all veterans, all local legends, all absolutely still. For the first time, Landon's expression shifted. Not fear yet, just confusion. "What is this?" he asked. Rex stepped closer. Close enough for Landon to feel presence, not close enough to threaten. His voice stayed calm, the kind of calm that belongs to men who have survived real violence. "You're gonna apologize," Landon actually smirked. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." Martha whispered from behind them. "Rex, please." He didn't take his eyes off Landon. "No, Martha, not this time." Landon laughed, a brittle sound. "You old bikers really think this is your business?" Boone stood up beside Rex, then Mace, then Dorian, then the other 7. A wall of black leather and hard-earned stillness. Rex's voice stayed low. "When someone spits on a woman who spent 30 years feeding this town, it becomes our business." Landon's confidence wavered. Only a little. But enough. He pulled out his phone. "My father is Senator Graham Pierce." No one moved. No one cared. That was the first thing Landon had encountered in 18 years that money couldn't immediately bend. My father can shut this place down. Rex tilted his head. Then I guess he'll have to explain why his son assaulted a 63-year-old waitress in front of 27 witnesses. The room stayed frozen. No one defended Landon. No one looked away. Even the rancher at the counter was watching now. Phone discreetly recording. Landon's jaw tightened. He looked around. For the first time in his life, he was surrounded by people who were not impressed by his name. And worse, they had something stronger. Moral certainty. He tried to move toward the door. Boone shifted casually into the aisle. Didn't touch him. Didn't threaten. Just occupied the space. Rex stepped closer. Still calm. Still controlled. You don't get to walk out after what you did. Landon's voice sharpened. This is intimidation. No, Rex said. This is accountability. You just haven't met it before. And then the diner door opened. A black government sedan pulled into the lot outside. Martha saw it through the glass first. Her stomach dropped, because she recognized the seal on the side. State Senate office. Someone had called his father. And in the next 60 seconds, Landon Pierce's life was going to split into two versions. The spoiled heir he had been, and the man these bikers were about to force him to become. The black state sedan rolled into the Silver Pine parking lot like it had every right to be there. Because in Ash Hollow, power always arrived polished. Dark paint, government plates, windows too tinted to read the faces inside. For 1 second, Landon's confidence came rushing back. Relief, familiarity, reinforcement. His father's world had finally arrived to correct reality. He straightened his coat, lifted his chin, and looked at Rex with the smugness of someone who believed the cavalry wore suits. You people just made a huge mistake. Rex didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even turn toward the window. Because men like Rex had spent too much of their lives watching powerful men step out of black cars. Judges, colonels, politicians, federal investigators, people who thought authority and righteousness were the same thing. They weren't. The driver's side opened first, then the rear passenger door, and Senator Graham Pierce stepped out. 57. Silver temples, campaign smile, the kind of expensive charcoal overcoat that whispered money instead of shouting it. A man who had spent 2 decades turning handshakes into leverage and leverage into immunity. He entered the diner fast, already annoyed. But the moment he saw the room, the phones out, the spilled plate, his son cornered by 10 Hell's Angels, and Martha Cole's red cheek still wet from humiliation, the politician in him took over. Everything in his face changed. Not concern, calculation. What happened? Graham demanded. Landon moved toward him immediately. Dad, these psychos are threatening me because this waitress can't make eggs. The room reacted. A rancher near the counter muttered, That boy's got nerve. Martha lowered her eyes. Not from guilt, from exhaustion. The kind that comes from realizing the rich always arrive with reinforcements. But before Senator Pierce could escalate, Rex stepped forward. His voice stayed level. Your son spit in her face. The words landed harder than shouting. Clean, undeniable. Several people lifted their phones higher. Evidence in every direction. Graham Pierce turned slowly toward Landon. For the first time, something real crossed his face. Not morality, not shame. Damage assessment. How many people recorded it? No one answered, because everyone knew what that question meant. Not did he do it? Not is she okay? Just how bad is the fallout? Rex gave the answer anyway. Enough. The senator exhaled through his nose. His jaw flexed. Then he looked at his son. What exactly did you do? Landon's voice dropped. Defensive now. She messed up the order twice. And? He hesitated. That was answer enough. Graham turned to Rex. What do you want? The diner went still. Even Landon looked confused. He'd expected threats. His father expected negotiation. Because powerful men always assume every moral line has a price. Rex glanced at Martha, then back at the senator. 60 days. Graham narrowed his eyes. For what? Your son works here. Landon let out a sharp laugh. No. Rex ignored him. 60 days. Morning shifts. Lunch rush. Closing duties. Every rude customer. Every spill. Every order mistake. He learns what it means to serve people instead of using them. Landon looked at his father in disbelief. You can't be serious. Rex's eyes never left Graham. Or the video goes public. There it was. The actual battlefield. Election season. Veterans funding bill on the line. A state senate race already tighter than Graham wanted. One viral clip of his son spitting on an elderly waitress while the son of Wyoming's working family candidate stood smug over her. It would be political napalm. The senator knew it. The whole room knew it. Landon stared at his father, waiting for the inevitable rescue. The lawsuit. The police threat. The bought silence. Instead, Graham Pierce did something Landon had never seen him do. He went silent. The kind of silence rich men use when numbers start rearranging themselves behind their eyes. Polls, donors, opposition research, media cycles. Then finally, he nodded once. Fine. Landon spun toward him. What? 60 days. Dad, you made the mess. You clean it up. The words sounded noble, responsible, but Rex saw right through it. This wasn't fatherly wisdom. This was campaign triage. Still, it served the same purpose. For the first time in Landon Pierce's life, his father was not shielding him from consequences, because the consequences had finally become expensive enough. Martha whispered, "This isn't necessary." Rex turned toward her. Yes, it is. And the way he said it made her stop arguing, because buried in his voice was grief. Old grief. The kind that had built entire codes of honor. Graham checked his watch. Tomorrow, 5:30 a.m. Landon's face had gone pale. You're actually doing this? His father's eyes hardened. For once in your life, Landon, you're going to learn how regular people live. Then the senator leaned closer. Only Landon heard the next part, but Rex read lips well enough. Do not ruin this election. That was the real lesson. Not morality. Optics. Landon saw it too, and something cold settled in his stomach. For the first time, he understood something ugly. He wasn't being punished because what he did was wrong. He was being punished because it was visible. That realization stayed with him long after the cars left. By the time the diner emptied out near noon, the story had already started moving through town. The kid, the spit, the bikers, the senator forced to agree. Ash Hollow was too small for secrets and too bored for restraint. By sunset, every gas station, feed store, beauty salon, and church parking lot in town was talking about Landon Pierce's 60 days at Silver Pine, and in the Pierce estate, things were worse. Their house sat on the hill north of town. 5 bedrooms, stone fireplace, imported marble. The kind of place that made people say must be nice with a smile that hid resentment. Landon slammed his bedroom door. His phone was exploding. Prep school friends, socialite girls, a dozen screenshots from group chats already laughing about him becoming a diner boy. Humiliation spread faster than wildfire when rich kids smelled weakness. A text from Derek Hollis lit up the screen. "Heard you got sentenced by grandpa bikers, LOL. Another. Bropos tell me there's footage Landon threw the phone across the room. For the first time, shame hit him clean. Not because of Martha. Not yet. Because now his peers knew. That's how shallow his world still was. He slept badly. Dreamed of the diner, the leather vests, the scrape of Rex's chair, the stillness in the room after the spit. At 5:08 a.m., his father's house manager knocked once. "Your car's waiting." No chauffeur, no black sedan, no rescue. Just his own Mercedes keys on the hallway table. Even that felt intentional. By 5:27, Landon stood in the back lot of Silver Pine Diner. Dark sky, frost in the air, Harleys already parked in a row. Of course they were here. The Hells Angels hadn't come for breakfast. They'd come to witness, to make sure this started. The back door opened. Gus stood there, holding an apron. "You're late." Landon checked his phone. "It's 5:27. Exactly." Inside, the kitchen lights were harsh and unforgiving. No polished marble, no scented candles, no central heating perfection. Just steel counters, old tile, coffee, grease, heat, reality. Martha stood by the prep sink, already working. Blue uniform, hair pinned up. Same tired eyes, same steady hands. For one awkward moment, neither spoke. The memory of yesterday sat between them like another person. Finally, she held out the apron. "Put this on." He stared at it. A cheap black diner apron. A strip of cloth that symbolized everything he had spent 18 years believing was beneath him. Seriously? Martha's eyes met his. For the first time, there was no softness in them. Just truth. "You wanted to know what this life feels like." Landon took the apron, tied it on. Poorly. She retied it in one motion. Her fingers brushed his wrist. Cold, work-worn, human, a tiny thing, but it unsettled him. Because suddenly, she wasn't the waitress. She was just a woman who had been awake for hours while he was still asleep in linen sheets. By 6:15, his first disaster happened. Coffee spill. Table 2. An elderly rancher named Milo. The mug slipped. Hot coffee splashed across the table and onto Milo's sleeve. Landon froze. Milo looked up, then at the trembling kid, then said quietly, "Happens." That should have made it easier. Instead, it made the shame worse, because kindness from people you disrespected is somehow heavier than anger. By 7 o'clock, Landon had mixed up 2 breakfast orders, dropped an entire tray of toast, overfilled 3 coffee cups, forgotten cream for a regular. Gotten grease on his loafers, burned his hand on a skillet handle, and learned that standing for 90 straight minutes could feel like punishment designed by God. The Hells Angels were at table 7, watching. Not mocking. Not helping. Just watching. Rex sipped coffee slowly, eyes on Landon every time the kid stumbled, every mistake, every flush of embarrassment, every muttered apology. This wasn't revenge. This was education. At 8:22, the morning rush hit. Truckers, teachers, a church group, construction workers. The whole diner flooded. Martha moved like a machine. Fast, efficient, remembering names, orders, special requests, the rhythm of service. Landon tried to keep up. Couldn't. Didn't even come close. His back hurt. His feet screamed. His shirt clung damp to his spine. And then Martha passed him in the aisle and said quietly, "Now imagine doing this with arthritis." The words hit harder than the workload, because for the first time, Landon looked at her hands. Really looked. Swollen knuckles, a faint tremor. Skin cracked from soap and winter. And yet she moved faster than him, better than him, more gracefully than he could comprehend. Something shifted. Tiny. Almost nothing. But it was there. The first hairline crack in 18 years of entitlement. At 10:03, Landon stepped into the back alley for air, bent over, hands on knees, humiliation and exhaustion mixing into something unfamiliar. Rex stepped out behind him, lit a cigarette, didn't offer one. Harder than it looks. Landon didn't answer. Rex exhaled smoke into the cold Wyoming morning. My mother was a waitress. Landon glanced up. Rex's face stayed still. Rich kid humiliated her once. Whole diner watched. Nobody moved. Landon swallowed. Rex looked straight at him now. I built my life around making sure that never happens again. Then he flicked the cigarette into the gravel. See you tomorrow, kid. He walked back inside, leaving Landon alone in the cold with sore feet, burned hands, and the first real taste of what consequences actually felt like. And this was only day 1. By the morning of day 3, Landon Pierce stopped checking the time every 5 minutes. That was the first sign something inside him had begun to change. Not enough to call it growth. Not yet. But enough to notice the shift. The Silver Pine parking lot was still dark when he arrived. No Maserati today. He'd left it at home. The sight of it in the diner lot had started to feel obscene. Instead, he came in the old pickup Gus let him borrow after quietly muttering, "No sense flaunting wealth while learning humility." At 5:18 a.m., Martha was already inside. Coffee going, bacon sizzling. Her grandson's lunch packed neatly in a brown paper bag beside the register. Landon hung his coat on the peg by the back door and reached automatically for an apron. Martha noticed. Didn't smile. But she noticed. "You're early. Thought I could help prep." That was new. 3 days ago he would have called it servitude. Now it just felt practical. She nodded toward the potatoes. Hash browns. He moved to the prep counter, started peeling. Poorly. Too much potato coming off with the skin. Martha stepped beside him. "No, like this." Her hands, stiff and swollen, moved with practiced economy. The knife barely wasted anything. He watched closely. There was something almost unsettling in realizing how much expertise lived inside tasks he'd once dismissed as simple. "How long did it take you to get this good?" he asked. Martha didn't stop cutting. "About 10 years. He looked up. She glanced sideways. People think this job is easy because they only see the plate arrive. That sentence stayed with him all morning because it applied to more than food. People only saw outcomes, never the labor hidden beneath them. By 6:40, the first regulars arrived. Milo, the rancher. Mrs. Green from the elementary school. 2 truckers from Casper. Landon took their orders. Still slower than Martha. Still awkward, but improving. And people noticed. Small-town people always notice effort, especially when it comes from someone they expected to fail. Mrs. Green adjusted her glasses when he brought her tea. "Well, look at you," He paused. What? You're trying. No sarcasm, no bite, just observation. That somehow felt heavier than mockery. At 7:15, the Hells Angels arrived. Same formation, same table 7, same 10 men, same silent acknowledgement. Rex sat where he always sat. End of the booth, clear line of sight to the room. Landon poured their coffee. Hands steadier now. No spills. Boone took a sip. Better. One word, but it landed like approval from a world Landon was only beginning to understand. By the lunch lull, Landon's feet hurt less, or maybe he was just getting used to pain. That thought bothered him, because Martha had probably been used to pain for years. At 1:05, the diner emptied enough for Martha to finally sit. Just 5 minutes. Counter stool near the pie case. A hand pressed to her knee. A tiny wince she tried to hide. Landon saw it. Really saw it. And instead of walking past, he stopped. Is it bad? She glanced embarrassed at him. Some days. Why don't you just stop? It came out more naive than cruel. Martha gave a tired half smile. Because Eli likes eating. That answer hit him harder than it should have. Not because it was dramatic, because it was ordinary. Bills, children, medicine, food. The invisible math adults lived inside. Landon had never done that math. Never had to. At home, food appeared. Cars were repaired. Lights stayed on. College tuition had already been arranged before he knew what tuition even was. He'd mistaken invisibility for effortlessness. Martha's whole life was built on labor nobody respected because they never had to see it. At 2:10, school let out, and for the first time, Landon met Eli Cole. The bell over the diner door jingled softly. A thin boy in a faded green hoodie stepped inside carrying a backpack too big for his shoulders. 9 years old, quiet eyes, old sadness. He moved straight behind the counter like this was muscle memory. Hi, Grandma. Hey, baby. Martha's whole face changed. Softer, lighter. The kind of warmth Landon realized she almost never allowed herself during shifts. Eli noticed Landon, studied him for a second. You're the mean guy. The words landed flat, honest. Children are surgeons with truth. Landon actually froze. Martha sighed softly. Eli. But the boy kept looking at him, not scared, just curious. Landon crouched slightly to meet his eye level. Yeah. Eli tilted his head. Why were you mean? No adult had asked it that simply. Not Rex, not Martha, not his father. And suddenly, Landon didn't have language polished enough to hide behind. I thought being important meant I could. Eli considered that, then asked, Did it? Landon swallowed. No. The boy nodded like that made sense. Then he walked to booth 3 and quietly started on homework. The conversation lasted less than 30 seconds. But it stayed with Landon longer than anything Rex had said. Because when a child names you honestly, there's nowhere to hide. That evening, after close, Landon helped Martha carry grocery bags to her car. Milk, bread, soup cans, generic cereal. Nothing expensive. The kind of groceries bought with precision, not appetite. As she opened the trunk, one bag tipped. A prescription bottle rolled halfway out. Landon caught it before it hit the pavement. He read the label. Arthritis medication. Refill overdue. Martha quickly took it back. It's fine. But he'd already seen the date. 3 weeks passed. You're not taking it? It can wait. The answer came too fast. Defensive. Automatic. Like she'd said it before. A lot. Landon stared at the grocery bags, at the paper-thin budget living in every item, then at the old Taurus with the check engine light glowing through the windshield, then at the little boy inside doing homework under fluorescent diner lights every afternoon because childcare cost money. For the first time, Martha's life stopped being abstract hardship. It became systems, choices no one should have to make, medicine or groceries, car repair or school supplies, pain relief or heating bill. His world had never forced either slash or decisions, only preferences. That night, he went home to the Hilltop Pierce estate. The marble floors felt colder than usual. Dinner sat plated under silver covers. His father was on the phone in the study talking campaign numbers. His mother was at some fundraiser in Jackson. The house manager informed him, "Your father wants you in the den when you're done." Landon walked in, still smelling faintly of coffee and fryer grease. Senator Graham Pierce sat in his leather chair, TV muted to a news channel. "You're still doing this?" Not a question. Landon nodded. Graham studied him. "You look terrible." Landon almost laughed. "My feet hurt." His father blinked, like physical pain in his son was a new concept. "Well, good." That surprised him. Then, Graham added, "Voters love discipline stories." And just like that, the moment soured. There it was again. Not growth, not morality. Narrative. Everything in his father's world existed as political utility. Even consequences. Landon looked at the family photos over the fireplace. Private schools, yacht summers, ski trips, a whole life of immaculate surfaces. And for the first time, it all felt hollow. The next morning, he arrived at Silver Pine with something in the passenger seat, a pharmacy bag. Martha was slicing strawberries when he set it on the counter. She frowned. "What's this?" "Your refill." Her face hardened immediately. "No. It was overdue." "That's not your business." 3 days ago, that tone would have made him snap back. Now he just stood there. "I know." Martha stared at the bag, then at him, then away. Pride and gratitude fought visibly across her face. Finally, she said quieter, "You can't solve people's lives with money." He nodded slowly. "I know that too." A pause. Then, "But I can stop pretending I don't see it." That changed something between them. Not forgiveness, not closeness, just recognition. The first honest bridge. At 7:15, the Hells Angels arrived. Rex sat down, eyes moving from Martha to the pharmacy bag tucked beneath the counter, then to Landon. He didn't say anything, but Landon caught the tiny nod. Respect. Not earned fully, but no longer impossible. Later that afternoon, while wiping down booth 4, the exact booth, where he had spit on Martha, Landon paused. His own reflection stared back at him in the diner window. Apron on, sleeves rolled, hair messy, a coffee stain near the hem. He barely recognized himself. And what unsettled him most wasn't the image. It was the realization that for the first time in his life, he respected this version of himself more than the polished one waiting at home. That night, in bed, sore and exhausted, Landon stared at the ceiling and replayed Eli's question. Did it? Did power make him important? Did cruelty make him bigger? Did money make him worthy? No, but something else was starting to. Work. Effort. Being useful. Seeing people. And by the time sleep finally took him, Landon Pierce realized something dangerous. He no longer feared the remaining 57 days. He feared what it would mean if he went back to who he used to be. By the start of week 2, Landon Pierce no longer walked into Silver Pine like someone serving a sentence. He walked in like someone trying not to fail. That difference mattered, not to him at first, but everyone else noticed it. Ash Hollow always noticed who kept showing up. The parking lot was still silver with frost when he arrived at 5:12 a.m., earlier than Martha, earlier than Gus, even earlier than the Hells Angels, which felt impossible. He unlocked the back door with the spare key Gus had tossed him the night before without ceremony. That tiny act of trust sat heavier on his shoulders than the key itself. Inside, the diner was dark except for the dim glow from the old soda cooler. Landon moved through the room slowly, turned on the coffee, straightened the sugar caddies, checked the creamers, set out the pie menus. For the first time in his life, he experienced something no school, no country club, and no campaign dinner had ever given him. Quiet usefulness, not applause, not validation, just the clean feeling of making someone else's morning easier. When Martha stepped in at 5:26, she stopped just inside the doorway. The coffee was already brewing, napkins stocked, condiments aligned. Her eyes found Landon by the prep counter. "You opened?" He shrugged, suddenly awkward. "Thought I'd save your hands a little work." Her swollen fingers flexed around her purse strap. She didn't say thank you. She didn't need to. The softness in her face said enough. By 7:15, the Hells Angels rolled in. 10 bikes. Same thunder. Same table 7. But this morning something was different. Instead of waiting for Martha, Landon approached with the coffee pot. No hesitation. No shaking hands. He poured for Rex first. Perfect level. Enough room for cream. Rex lifted the mug, took a sip, and looked at him for a long second. Learning. One word. But from Rex, it felt like a medal. The morning rush hit hard. A bus from Cheyenne had broken down nearby, sending 8 hungry travelers into the diner at once. The place filled fast, orders stacking, coffee emptying faster than Landon could refill, plates flying out of Gus's kitchen window. But this time, Landon moved. Not gracefully, not like Martha, but with intention. He carried plates, cleared tables, remembered refills, caught mistakes before they reached customers. At 10:40, the freezer in the back kitchen died, just stopped humming. The silence hit like a siren. Gus cursed under his breath. "That thing goes out, I lose $600 in meat." Before anyone else could react, Boone from the Hells Angels was already standing. "Let me look." Boone had spent 30 years running a motorcycle repair shop outside Laramie. Machines made sense to him, people less so. Landon followed him into the kitchen. The old freezer panel was open in seconds. Boone pointed inside. "See this?" A loose fan belt. Tiny. Almost nothing. Landon leaned closer. "This shuts the whole thing down?" Boone nodded. "Most disasters start small." The sentence felt bigger than refrigeration. Boone handed him a screwdriver. "You tighten it." Landon hesitated. "I don't know how." "Then learn." That was how the Hells Angels taught. Not speeches, not pity. Tasks, responsibility, faith through action. Landon tightened the housing bracket under Boone's guidance. The freezer kicked back on. A low hum filled the kitchen. Gus let out a breath. "Kid just saved my lunch inventory." Landon wiped grease from his fingers. A strange warmth settled in his chest. It wasn't pride exactly, more like earned usefulness. At noon, the diner door opened, and the room changed. A man stepped in, wearing a faded Army veteran cap. Tall, gaunt, mid-60s, the kind of face life had sanded down into something sharp. His eyes landed on Landon immediately. Stayed there. Martha saw it too. Her expression tightened. Because she knew the man. Everyone in town did. Harold Vance, retired steelworker, widower, father of Ethan Vance. Landon's stomach dropped before Harold even spoke. Because Ethan Vance had been in his class sophomore year. Quiet kid, scholarship student, wrong shoes, wrong side of town. The perfect target for rich boys who needed entertainment. Landon and his prep school friends had made Ethan's life miserable for months. Mocked him, recorded him, spread edited videos online, turned him into a joke. Ethan transferred after winter break. 6 months later, he was dead. Pills. A motel room in Sheridan. No note. Harold sat at booth 6. The silence around him spread. Then he looked directly at Landon. "I'll take table service from the senator's boy." The words were calm. Too calm. Landon glanced at Martha. She gave the slightest nod. No rescue. He walked over with a notepad, his throat dry. "What can I get you, sir?" Harold looked at him for a long moment, long enough to make Landon feel every second of the past. "Coffee. Black. Chicken fried steak." Landon wrote it down. Harold didn't stop. "You remember my son?" There it was. No way around it. Landon's hand tightened around the pen. "Yes." Harold's face didn't move. "Do you remember what you did to him?" The whole diner felt still again. Even the Hells Angels were quiet, because this was a different kind of reckoning. Not service, not labor, moral debt. "Yes." The word came out barely above a whisper. Harold nodded slowly. "Good. Means you still have a conscience." Landon stood frozen. Harold leaned back. "My boy thought people could change, even after what your friends did to him." The use of your friends hit harder than you, because it named the cowardice too. The hiding inside group cruelty, the laughter that feels less guilty when everyone joins in. Harold's voice stayed even. "I don't know if I believe him." Landon's mouth opened. Nothing came out, because there was no defense, no polished language, no inherited legal strategy. Only truth. He'd helped break someone, and the father of that someone was now calmly eating lunch in the diner where Landon was learning what dignity cost. Harold finally said, "Bring the coffee." Landon turned toward the counter. His legs felt numb. He poured the mug carefully, hands shaking, set it down in front of Harold. The older man looked up. "Your life ever get hard before this?" Landon swallowed. "No." Harold took a sip. "Good. Then maybe now you'll understand what happens when people with easy lives create hard ones for everybody else." The sentence stayed in Landon's chest like a splinter. The rest of the shift blurred. Orders, plates, refills. But Harold Vance's presence in booth 6 changed the weight of every movement. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about Martha, or the spit, or diner work. It was about the trail of smaller cruelties Landon had never counted, because nobody had forced him to. Until now. After lunch, Harold stood to leave. Landon instinctively moved to apologize. Harold raised a hand. "Don't." Landon froze. Harold's eyes locked onto his. "Apologies are easy when shame gets public." Then softer. "Become the kind of man my son believed you could be. That'll mean more." He walked out. The bell over the diner door jingled once, and Landon stood there, unable to move. Rex approached from table 7, didn't speak immediately. just stood beside him in silence. Finally. "Now you understand." Landon looked at him. "No, I'm starting to." Rex nodded. "That's enough for today." That evening, after close, Landon stayed behind. Not because anyone asked, because he needed motion, needed work, needed something to do with the heaviness in his chest. He scrubbed booth 6 twice, then booth 4, then the counters. Martha watched him for a while. Finally, she said, "You can't undo people." He stopped, hand still on the rag. "I know. You can only decide what kind of person leaves this place when the 60 days are over." That line followed him all the way home, past the empty highway, past the mansion lights on the hill, past the marble floors and family portraits, and his father on television talking about values. Because for the first time, Landon Pierce realized his greatest fear wasn't punishment anymore. It was leaving Silver Pine unchanged. And somewhere in the Wyoming dark, the spoiled heir to Senator Graham Pierce's empire began wanting something terrifying. Redemption. By day 14, Landon Pierce no longer looked like the boy who had walked into Silver Pine wearing arrogance like a second skin. The first thing that changed was his posture. Less performance. Less chest-out entitlement. More movement shaped by actual fatigue. Real work humbles the body before it ever reaches the mind. At 5:06 a.m., he was already in the kitchen, helping Gus unload crates from the morning supply truck. Eggs, bacon, potatoes, flour, cases of canned peaches. The boxes were heavier than they looked. That had become a theme in his life. Everything important was heavier than it looked. Gus grunted as he lifted a crate of milk. "You're getting stronger." Landon shifted the weight in his arms. "Still feels like my shoulders are being ripped off." Gus snorted. "That means you're using muscles your old life never needed." The line hit deeper than the joke, because that was exactly what this was. Not punishment anymore. Development. Parts of him, his old world had left completely atrophied, were finally being forced awake. At 7:15, the Hells Angels arrived. Same thunder, same line of Harleys, same ritual. But now when Landon approached table 7 with the coffee pot, the atmosphere had changed. Not acceptance, not fully, but the edge of hostility was gone. Rex took his mug. "Morning, kid." Morning. Simple. Normal. Human. 2 weeks ago, Landon would have considered that meaningless. Now it mattered more than most conversations in his father's mansion. At 8:30, the diner door opened, and Trouble walked in wearing a pressed golf jacket. Derek Hollis, prep school friend, country club tennis partner. The kind of rich boy who always laughed half a second too loud when someone weaker got embarrassed. Behind him came 2 more from the same world, Parker Dean and Miles Sutton. All smiles, all cologne, all expensive watches and inherited certainty. Landon felt his stomach tighten immediately, because this wasn't an accident. News of his diner work had spread beyond Ash Hollow. Rich kids loved 2 things, privilege and the public humiliation of someone falling beneath it. Derek spotted him behind the counter and broke into a grin. "No way." Too loud, too theatrical. The whole diner heard. "You're actually doing this." Martha looked up from table 3. Rex's eyes lifted from his coffee. The room shifted into that familiar stillness. Landon walked over with menus. Professional. Controlled. "Table for 3? Derek laughed harder. "Oh my God, listen to you." He slid into booth 4, the same booth, the one where Landon had spit on Martha. The irony landed like a fist. Parker smirked. So what's the special? Shame with fries? Miles pulled out his phone, already recording. Of course he was. This was content, humiliation as social currency. Landon felt the old instinct rise, the polished cruelty, the biting comeback, the class-based venom his old world had trained into him. But then he looked toward Martha. She was serving Mrs. Green tea with the same quiet dignity she always had. And suddenly, he understood something. This was his test. Not diner work, not pain, not exhaustion. Identity. Who was he when his old world came back to invite him home? Derek snapped his fingers. Hey, waiter, coffee. The whole booth laughed. Landon stood there, still, then said calmly, Sure. No sarcasm, no anger, just service. That silence hit Derek harder than any insult could have, because mockery only works when the target agrees to play the old role. Landon didn't. He poured the coffee. Perfectly. Set it down. Parker leaned back. So what, man? Did the bikers brainwash you? Rex's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Boone's jaw tightened. But Landon answered before any of them could. No. Then, after a beat, they just made me see what kind of person I was. That landed. Even Derek's smile flickered. Because sincerity makes cruel people uncomfortable. They kept pushing. Little jabs, snide remarks, performative disrespect. But Landon didn't crack, didn't rise, didn't retreat. And somewhere in the middle of serving the very kind of people he used to be, he realized something terrifying. He no longer liked them. Not because they were rich, because they were empty. At 11:50, Derek crossed the line. Martha passed their booth carrying pie slices. Derek glanced at her and muttered just loud enough. So, this is the old lady who trained the senator's son. Landon stopped dead. The old version of him would have laughed, maybe joined in, maybe escalated. Instead, he turned slowly, voice flat. You're done. Derek blinked. What? You pay for the coffee and leave. The booth stared at him. Parker actually laughed. Are you serious? Landon stepped closer. Not threatening, but solid. The kind of stillness Rex had. Something he'd learned from Table 7. You don't disrespect her in here. The whole diner had gone silent. Derek looked around, saw the Hells Angels, saw Martha frozen near the pie case, saw Landon not backing down. And for the first time since walking in, Derek's confidence cracked. Because the social hierarchy had changed, Landon wasn't below him anymore. He was simply somewhere else now. Derek tossed cash on the table. Whatever, man. They left. The bell over the door jingled hard behind them. Silence held for 2 seconds. Then Boone muttered from Table 7. Kids learning. Rex looked at Landon, not smiling, but something stronger. Recognition. This was no longer compliance. This was choice. That afternoon, the Taurus finally died. Martha had just finished her shift when the engine coughed once, then gave up entirely in the diner lot. She sat there, gripping the wheel, too tired even to curse. Landon was already outside before she stepped out. What happened? She gave a dry laugh. Life. He lifted the hood, stared into the engine like it might explain poverty in mechanical terms. Then a Harley rolled up beside them. Boone. Of course. He killed the engine, stepped off, and looked once. Alternator. Martha sighed. I can't afford. Boone cut her off. Didn't ask. Within 15 minutes, 3 Hells Angels were there. Boone, Mace, Rex, hands deep in the engine, tools appearing from saddlebags like magic. Landon held the flashlight, watched, listened, learned. This was another kind of masculinity than the one he'd been raised around. Not dominance, not image. Competence in service of others. At one point, Rex glanced at him and said, "Power's not what you can make people do. It's what you can help them survive." That sentence stayed with him. The Taurus started. Martha's eyes welled instantly. "I can't repay." Rex wiped grease from his hands. "You already did. 30 years of coffee and kindness." That night, after Eli finished homework at the diner, Landon helped him with math. Fractions, word problems. The boy frowned at the worksheet, then looked up. "You're less mean now." Landon laughed despite himself. "That's the nicest thing anyone said to me all week." Eli smiled, a small one. "Rare." Then quietly asked, "Are you staying after the 60 days? The question hit him harder than it should have, because for the first time he realized the answer mattered to someone. To Martha, to Eli, to Gus, maybe even to himself. "I don't know." Eli nodded. Then said the thing children say when they've been silently observing adults all along. "You seem happier here than at your big house." Landon looked at the diner around them. Warm lights, coffee smell. Rex laughing softly at table 7. Martha counting the till. Gus wiping the grill. A tiny ecosystem of usefulness. Family built by labor instead of blood. And the terrifying thing was, Eli was right. He was happier here. Much happier. Later, as he locked up with Martha, he finally asked the question that had been building for days. Why does Rex care so much? Martha paused with the keys in her hand. For a long moment, she just looked out at the empty lot, then said quietly, "Because his mother was me." Landon went still. She was a waitress in Arizona. Powerful man's son humiliated her in public. Nobody stood up. 2 weeks later, she took her life. The Wyoming night suddenly felt colder. Rex was 14. Landon couldn't speak. Martha's voice stayed soft. He built his whole life after that around one promise. No woman who works for her living gets left alone if he's in the room. The weight of that settled into Landon's chest like iron. This was never about eggs, never about diner discipline, never even just about him. This was legacy. Pain transformed into protection. And as he drove home under the black Wyoming sky, Landon realized something bigger than redemption had started. He wasn't just becoming better. He was being invited into an entirely different definition of what strength meant. And somewhere far above the town, in the lit windows of the Pierce mansion, his father was already preparing the next move. Because powerful men rarely stay quiet when they feel control slipping. The first sign that Senator Graham Pierce had decided to strike back came on a gray Tuesday morning at 9:17 a.m. The silver pine bell jingled, but this wasn't the sound of hungry regulars. It was the sound of trouble wearing polished shoes. 2 men stepped inside. Dark suits. Federal posture. Clean haircuts. No wasted motion. The kind of men who moved like every room already belonged to them. The gold badges flashed so fast, most customers missed the details. But Martha saw them. Rex saw them. And Landon felt his stomach drop before either of them even spoke. Federal Bureau of Investigation. The entire diner changed temperature. Conversation stopped. Forks paused. Coffee mugs hovered halfway to lips. One of the agents, tall and sharp-faced, stepped forward. "We're looking into the Iron Serpent's motorcycle club." Not Hell's Angels. That name was the public nickname the town used. Legally, The Ash Hollow chapter operated under Iron Serpent's MC, a veteran support riding club with a rough reputation and an even rougher sense of justice. Rex slowly rose from table 7, not threatened, not surprised, almost like he'd expected this. "What's the concern?" The second agent, older, colder, scanned the room. "Allegations of coercion, extortion, and unlawful intimidation involving Senator Graham Pierce's son." There it was, the counterattack. Not direct, never direct. Powerful men weaponize institutions. They don't throw punches. They redirect systems. Martha's hand tightened around the coffee pot. Landon felt heat rush into his face, because he knew immediately. His father. This had his fingerprints all over it. Not because the accusation was believable, because it was strategic. The first agent turned toward Landon. "Mr. Pierce, we'd like your statement." The entire diner went still. Everyone looked at him. Martha, Rex, Gus, Eli doing homework in booth 3, the Hells Angels, the truckers, the regulars. This was the moment. The kind of moment that doesn't announce itself as life-defining until it's already over. Landon stepped forward. "No one coerced me." The agent's expression didn't move. "Your father states you were threatened." Landon almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was so perfectly his father. Take the moral failure. Repackage it as victimhood. Weaponize the truth until it serves power. "I wasn't threatened," Landon said again, louder now. "I spit on Martha Cole, in front of witnesses. Rex gave me a choice to work here instead of letting the video go public. My father agreed because it was deserved." The younger agent's eyes narrowed. "So this arrangement was voluntary?" "Yes." Rex remained silent, because this had to come from Landon. The old world versus the new one. Authority versus integrity. The agent glanced toward table 7. "We'll still need security footage and witness statements." Gus stepped forward. "You'll get them." The agents nodded and left as quickly as they came. But the damage had already been done. The room stayed silent even after the door shut. Everyone understood the message. This wasn't about law. This was about pressure. About making the diner feel unsafe. About reminding the Iron Serpents that powerful men could reach farther than small towns ever could. Martha set the coffee pot down carefully. Too carefully. Her hands were shaking. Landon saw it. That tiny tremor. The same one from the morning of the spit. And suddenly fury rose in him. Not the hot, entitled rage he used to know. Something colder. Cleaner. Protective. "My father did this." No one answered. Because everyone already knew. Rex finally sat back down. Voice low. "Of course he did." At 11:30, a black SUV pulled into the lot. Then another. Then a local news van. The FBI visit had already leaked. Ash Hollow moved fast. By lunch, whispers spread. The biker club was under investigation. The diner might lose its business license. Senator Pierce was protecting his son. Maybe the old waitress had manipulated the whole thing. That last rumor hit Martha the hardest, because that's how systems protect power. They don't just defend the strong. They make the vulnerable look suspicious. By 2 o'clock, business was down nearly half. People still came. The loyal ones. The regulars. But others stayed away. Fear does that, especially in small towns, where being seen in the wrong place can become its own risk. Martha stared at the nearly empty room. "This place can't survive a week like this." Gus was quieter than usual, because they all knew the numbers. Small diners don't survive scandals, even false ones, especially when politicians decide to turn them into cautionary tales. That evening, Rex called an emergency meeting in the back lot. 10 Harleys. 10 men. Landon stood beside them now. Not fully one of them, but no longer separate. Rex leaned against his bike. This isn't random. Boone crossed his arms. Senator's trying to bury us before the story turns on him. Mace spat into the gravel. Classic. Landon's jaw tightened. He thinks if he scares the town enough, everyone backs off. Rex looked at him carefully. You know your father. Landon stared out across the empty Wyoming road, the horizon burning orange in the sunset. He doesn't care about being right. He cares about controlling the narrative. That sentence sat heavy in the air, because it was true. For the first time, Landon wasn't just surviving his father's world. He was translating it, making the enemy legible. Rex nodded slowly. Then we stop playing defense. That night, Landon drove home to the Pierce mansion. The lights were on in the study, his father waiting. Of course, the room smelled like bourbon and polished wood. Senator Graham Pierce stood by the fireplace, one hand in his pocket. You embarrassed me today. Landon stared at him. You sent the FBI after veterans in a diner. His father didn't flinch. I sent them after a biker club that coerced my son. That's a lie. Graham stepped closer. No, it's politics. The sheer calmness of it stunned Landon. The ability to say something monstrous like it was merely procedural. You're hurting innocent people. Graham's face hardened. They're collateral. The word hit like a slap. Collateral. The diner. Martha. Eli. Gus. Rex. All reduced to acceptable losses in a campaign equation. Landon finally saw it fully. The moral architecture of the house he grew up in. Everything negotiable. Everyone expendable. As long as the machine kept winning. His father poured another drink. You're done at that diner. Landon didn't answer. Graham turned. I'm serious. Still no answer. Then, no. The word seemed to freeze the room, because in 18 years, Landon Pierce had never once said no to his father. Not really. Graham stared at him. You think these bikers made you into something? Landon met his eyes. No, they just showed me what you never did. Silence. Thick. Dangerous. Then Graham said the most revealing thing yet. You are throwing away your future for service workers and old bikers. Landon's voice stayed calm. No, I'm finally choosing one. He left the study, heart hammering. Not because he feared punishment, because something irreversible had just happened. The bridge had cracked, maybe permanently. The next morning, Silver Pine was quieter still. A handwritten notice had been taped to the front window overnight. Under investigation. No signature. No source. Just fear as vandalism. Martha stared at it. Face pale. Eli looked confused. Are we in trouble? Before Martha could answer, Landon stepped forward and ripped the paper down. No. Then he looked at her. At Gus. At Rex walking in through the front door. At the empty booths that once held half the town. And he made a decision. A dangerous one. The kind that splits lives. I know how to stop him. Rex studied him. How? Landon's face had changed. No fear, no hesitation. Only clarity. My father's not just corrupt. He's hiding something bigger. The Hells Angels went still, because everyone understood what that meant. The diner war had just become political warfare, and in the next chapter, Landon Pierce was going to choose whether blood still meant loyalty, or whether truth had finally become stronger. Landon Pierce had spent 18 years inside his father's world. That was why he knew exactly where the bodies were buried. Not literal bodies. Something worse. Paper trails, offshore accounts, campaign shell donors, veterans' healthcare contracts rerouted through administrative partners, numbers disguised as policy, the kind of corruption that never bleeds in public but leaves people dead all the same. At 5:40 a.m., before the Silver Pine even opened, Landon sat at booth 7 with Rex, Martha, Gus, and the 10 iron serpents surrounding them like a war council. The diner lights were low, coffee steaming. Wyoming dawn still blew outside the windows. Landon had barely slept. His father's words from the study kept replaying. Collateral. That one word had changed everything. He looked at Rex. There's a storage office above my father's campaign headquarters in Cheyenne. Rex leaned forward slightly. Go on. My father never keeps anything directly on his Senate devices. He's paranoid. He keeps backup files off the books, donor spreadsheets, redirected grants, legal payoffs, internal memos. Boone muttered. Smart criminal. Landon nodded grimly. He thinks family means silence, so he never bothered hiding it from me. Martha's hands folded tighter around her mug. And this can stop the investigation? Landon exhaled slowly. It can do more than that. The room went still, because everyone understood what sat beneath the sentence. This was no longer about clearing the diner. This was about bringing down a senator. Rex's voice stayed calm. Then we need someone who can verify it before we move. As if summoned by the words, the diner bell jingled. A woman stepped in, wearing a tan coat dusted with road snow, late 30s, dark hair tied back, sharp eyes, the kind that saw through walls and lies equally well. Rex gave the smallest nod. Right on time. She approached the table. Lena Brooks, Wyoming Tribune. Landon recognized the name immediately. Investigative journalist. 3 state corruption exposés in 5 years. 2 resignations. 1 judge imprisoned. She sat down. No small talk. Rex slid a file folder toward her. Inside, copies of the FBI notice, photos of the diner sign vandalism, timestamps of the visit, and a written statement from Landon. Lena flipped through it quickly, then looked at him. You're saying your father weaponized a federal investigation to bury a local diner and a veterans motorcycle club? Yes. And you can prove deeper fraud. Landon nodded. I know where. Lena studied him for a long moment. Why now? The question cut straight to the bone. Why now? Why not years ago? Why not before Martha? Before Eli? Before Harold Vance? Before seeing what his old life actually cost other people? Landon answered honestly. Because I finally know what people like him do to everyone outside the gates. Lena held his gaze, then nodded once. Good enough. By 9:30 a.m., Landon, Lena, and Rex were on the road to Cheyenne. Rex insisted on riding behind them with Boone and Mace on Harleys, not for intimidation, for insurance. The campaign headquarters sat in a restored brick building downtown. All glass, steel, clean signage, the kind of place corruption wears as camouflage. Landon parked in the alley behind it. His pulse pounded harder with every step, because this wasn't just evidence. This was betrayal, bloodline treason, and somewhere inside him, the old instinct still whispered, protect family. But another voice had grown louder, the one Silver Pine had built. Protect the people your family hurts. The upstairs storage office was exactly where he remembered. 2nd floor, back corridor, locked metal filing room. He entered the keypad code from memory. His father's birthday. The arrogance of men who believe no one close to them will ever become dangerous. The door clicked open. Rows of gray filing cabinets, external hard drives, locked document boxes, campaign archive labels. Lena immediately started photographing everything. Landon moved to the far cabinet. Third drawer, false back panel. Still there. His fingers found the release latch. A hidden compartment slid open. Inside, offshore banking transfers. Via healthcare grant diversions, shell company contracts, internal legal memos, opposition neutralization payments, and a spreadsheet titled Rural Veterans Allocation Reductions. Rex stepped closer. His face changed, because halfway down page 2 was a name. Thomas Cole, Martha's husband. Lung cancer treatment denial. Funding reallocated. Administrative insufficiency. Rex's jaw locked. Landon felt sick, because suddenly Martha's hardship wasn't abstract anymore. It was his father's decision, not the universe, not bad luck. A pen stroke, a budget line, a human life turned into savings. Lena whispered, almost to herself, "This is federal prison." At that exact moment, footsteps echoed in the hall. 3 sets. Fast. Landon's blood froze. Security. Or worse. The office door pushed open. Campaign legal counsel. 2 private security men behind him. The lawyer's eyes widened, then hardened. "Landon!" There was no time for explanation, no legal dance, no bluff, because Lena already had the photos, the drives, the documents. Rex moved half a step forward, not threatening, but enough to change the room's physics. The lawyer saw Boone and Mace in the doorway behind them, saw the leather, saw the absolute stillness, and made the only smart choice. He stepped aside. No one spoke until they were back in the car. The evidence case sat in Lena's lap like a live explosive. Because that's what truth is when power has spent years suppressing it. By the time they reached Ash Hollow, Lena had already called her editor. The story would go live at 6 p.m. Headline locked. Sources verified. Bank records cross-matched. No turning back. Silver Pine was packed when they returned. News had spread that something big was coming. The regulars had come back. Truckers, ranchers, teachers, veterans, the whole town. Fear had shifted into anticipation. Martha stood behind the counter, eyes searching Landon's face. He stepped toward her slowly, held out the copied page. Her hands trembled as she read the line. Thomas Cole, chemotherapy denial due to redirected state allocation. For 1 second, she didn't breathe. Then the paper shook harder. Her husband's death. All these years, she had buried it under phrases like bad timing, insurance problems. The system failed us. No, it had a name, a signature, a man in a suit. Senator Graham Pierce. Martha's voice came out thin. He killed Tom. No one corrected the wording, because morally it was true. The diner fell into that deep, terrible silence again. The same kind of silence from the spit. Only this time the cruelty had a much larger shape. Eli looked up from booth 3. "Grandma?" Martha quickly wiped her eyes, but Rex stepped beside her, gentle, solid. "Your husband deserved better." She nodded, tears finally breaking free. 33 years of labor, widowhood, bills, pain, all suddenly reframed by a single political theft. Landon stood there, unable to speak, Because this was the real cost of inherited privilege, not just comfort, unseen casualties. At exactly 6 p.m., every phone in the diner lit up. Notifications, alerts, news apps, social feeds. The headline exploded across Wyoming media. Senator Graham Pierce linked to Veterans Fund fraud. Diner smear campaign. Below it, banking records, healthcare diversions, shell company maps, and the full story of the Silver Pine FBI intimidation attempt. The diner erupted. Not celebration. Shock. Vindication. A town finally seeing the invisible architecture behind its suffering. Landon's phone rang. Father. He stared at it. Declined. It rang again. Declined. A text appeared. You have no idea what you've done. For the first time in his life, Landon looked at those words and felt no fear, only clarity. Because tomorrow morning, he was going to do something even worse. He was going to stand on courthouse steps beside the Iron Serpents, Martha Cole, and a journalist, and tell the whole state exactly what kind of man Senator Graham Pierce really was. The son was about to publicly bury the father, and there would be no coming back after that. By sunrise, the whole state already knew. Phones buzzed across Wyoming ranch houses, motel lobbies, truck stops, hospital break rooms, and every diner counter from Casper to Cheyenne. The headline had spread faster than weather, faster than scandal usually did, because this one had everything America loved. A corrupt senator, stolen veterans' money, a rich son turning on his own father. And at the center of it all, a 63-year-old waitress from a roadside diner who had spent 3 decades surviving the fallout of decisions made in marble buildings. By 8:10 a.m., the steps of the Ash Hollow County Courthouse were lined with news vans, satellite dishes, tripods, microphones, the kind of media swarm small towns only ever see after murders, disasters, or political collapse. Today, it was all three in spirit. Landon Pierce stood at the top of the courthouse steps in a plain dark coat. No designer watch, no polished prep school shoes, no trace of the polished senator's son image his father had spent years manufacturing. Beside him stood Lena Brooks, legal folder in hand. To his left, Martha Cole. Blue waitress uniform beneath her winter coat, hands clasped, back straight. The same dignity she'd carried through poverty, widowhood, and public humiliation. Only now the whole state was finally about to understand what that dignity had cost her. Behind them, arranged in a silent black wall of leather and veteran stillness, stood the 10 Iron Serpents. Rex in front, Boone beside him. The others spaced with military precision. No threats, no intimidation. Just presence, witness, protection. Exactly what they had always represented. The reporter shouted first. "Landon, did your father know about the diverted VA funds? Did the FBI target the diner under political orders? Were you threatened into speaking today?" That last question almost made him laugh. Threatened? No. He had finally become free enough to tell the truth. Lena stepped to the microphones first. Professional. Sharp. The documents we obtained yesterday verify a 7-year diversion of state and federal veteran medical allocations into shell companies tied directly to Senator Graham Pierce's campaign finance network. Cameras flashed. Pens moved. Live feeds streamed. Then she stepped aside, and Landon moved forward. The microphone felt heavier than any coffee tray he had carried at Silver Pine, because this weight was moral, permanent. No cleanup after this, no second chance with public truth. He looked out at the cameras, at the crowd, at the veterans standing in the back, at ordinary people who had driven in from neighboring towns because the Silver Pine story had stopped feeling local. Then he began. "My name is Landon Pierce." His voice was steady. That surprised him. For most of my life, that name opened doors, protected mistakes, and insulated me from consequences. The reporters leaned in. 2 weeks ago, I walked into the Silver Pine diner and spit in the face of Martha Cole because I believed people like her existed to absorb my frustration. The silence deepened. Martha lowered her eyes, not in shame, in memory. I was wrong. The sentence landed harder than the confession, because real remorse always sounds quieter than performance. Landon continued. The men behind me didn't threaten me. They did something far more dangerous. They made me live with what I had done. They made me work beside the people my world had spent years looking through. A murmur moved through the press line. Behind him, Rex remained motionless. Landon lifted the folder Lena had prepared. "These documents prove my father diverted medical funding intended for veterans and rural patients." He paused, then forced himself to say the next part. "One of the names in those records was Thomas Cole, Martha's husband." Martha's eyes shut briefly. The cameras caught everything. Landon's voice dropped lower. "Thomas Cole died because his chemotherapy coverage was denied after those funds were redirected." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The cruelty had a face now, not abstract fraud. A widow, a dead husband, a child growing up without a grandfather. That was what made corruption real. He looked directly into the cameras. "My father used the FBI to intimidate a diner, a veterans riding club, and a town full of ordinary people because he believed fear would bury the truth." The crowd behind the barricades shifted, anger moving like electricity. Veterans in old jackets, teachers, truckers, nurses, the forgotten people. Politics always claimed to represent while quietly exploiting. Landon's voice hardened. "I am releasing every document, every transfer record, every internal memo, and every witness statement to the Wyoming Attorney General, the FBI Public Corruption Division, and the press." The questions exploded instantly. "Landon, are you accusing your father of murder? Did your family benefit financially? What happens to the campaign?" He stepped back. Lena moved in. No more questions. The story was already detonating. As the press surged around Lena, Landon turned. Martha was crying. Not loud, not dramatic. The quiet tears of someone who had finally been given a name for a grief she'd been carrying blind for years. He stepped toward her. "I'm sorry." This time the words meant something different. Not the easy shame Harold Vance had warned him about. This wasn't apology as relief. It was ownership. Martha looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "I know." 3 words. Simple, but in them lived something larger than forgiveness. Recognition. He had changed. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough for truth to matter more than blood. The courthouse doors burst open. State investigators, 2 U.S. Marshals, a district prosecutor. Phones immediately lifted again, because the timing was almost cinematic, and politics always collapses louder when the cameras are already rolling. A black SUV had just pulled up at the curb. Senator Graham Pierce stepped out. Alone. No staff. No security. No campaign handlers. For the first time in Landon's life, his father looked smaller. Still expensive. Still polished. But diminished. A man stripped of certainty. The reporters surged toward him. "Senator!" Did you divert the funds? Did you target the Silver Pine Diner? Did your son betray you? Graham ignored them. His eyes found Landon immediately. The crowd seemed to disappear around them. Father and son, old world and new, inheritance and rejection. He walked slowly up the courthouse steps, stopped 3 feet away. For one long moment, no one spoke. Then Graham said quietly, "You chose them over your family." Landon met his eyes. "No." Then, after a beat, "I chose the people your family kept hurting." That hit. The old senator mask cracked for the first time. Something like real anger. Or maybe realization. Graham looked past him at Martha, at Rex, at the Iron Serpents, at the veterans in the crowd, at the press, at the state investigators waiting at the courthouse doors, then finally back at his son. "You have no idea what this costs." Landon thought about sore feet, coffee burns, Harold Vance, Eli's math homework, Martha skipping medicine, Rex's mother, Thomas Cole dying because of a spreadsheet, and said the truest thing he had ever said in his life. "I finally do." The marshals approached, quiet, professional. "Senator Graham Pierce, we have a warrant for your arrest and charges of fraud, conspiracy, and misuse of federal veteran medical allocations." The whole courthouse lawn erupted. Shouts, cameras, live anchors nearly yelling into microphones. The senator looked at the agents, then at Landon. For a split second, something flickered. Not hatred, recognition. The understanding that the son he had spent years grooming into legacy had instead become judgment. He extended his wrists. The cuffs clicked. Metal on bone. The sound of empire ending. As they led him down the steps, the crowd parted, and somewhere in the middle of the noise, a phone notification went off. Then another. Then dozens. The original Silver Pine spit video had finally leaked. Not the courthouse footage. The diner footage from the first day. Landon humiliating Martha. The Iron Serpents rising behind him. Rex stepping forward. It exploded online instantly. Now the whole country could see the exact moment the senator's son became the architect of his father's downfall. By the time Landon got back to Silver Pine that night, the diner parking lot was full. Cars, motorcycles, news vans, locals, strangers, people from neighboring counties, and taped to the front window where the fake investigation notice had once been was a new sign. "Thank you, Martha." Inside, the diner was packed shoulder to shoulder. The whole town had come back. Business restored. Fear replaced by loyalty. Vindication had a smell. Tonight, it smelled like coffee, pie, and old leather. Martha stood behind the counter crying into Rex's shoulder. Gus was laughing for the first time in days. Eli was showing the viral video count to anyone who would look. Landon stood in the doorway and took it all in. The room turned toward him. For one heartbeat, silence. Then the entire diner erupted into applause. Not for the senator's son. For the boy who had finally become someone worth standing for. And tomorrow, after the headlines settled, something even bigger was coming. The whole country was about to give Martha Cole something she had never once allowed herself to dream about. Freedom. The next morning, Silver Pine Diner was impossible to recognize. Cars lined both sides of Route 16 for nearly half a mile. Pickup trucks, motorcycles, news vans from Denver, Billings, Cheyenne, even Salt Lake. People stood outside in winter coats holding coffee cups, waiting for a table in a diner they had spent years driving past without ever really seeing. That was the thing about public truth. Once people finally saw someone suffering, they suddenly wanted to be part of the repair. At 6 a.m., Martha Cole unlocked the front door and just stood there. The handwritten sign from the night before was still taped to the glass. "Thank you, Martha." Only now there were dozens more. Sticky notes, index cards, children's handwriting, veterans' signatures, little messages from strangers. For Thomas, for Eli's future, for every woman who kept showing up. Martha's hand rose slowly to her mouth. For 33 years, she had come to this building in darkness, in pain, in survival mode. Never once imagining the world would stop long enough to look back at her. Behind her, Landon stepped inside carrying a tray of fresh mugs. He stopped too. The walls of the diner had changed overnight. Every inch of the front windows was now covered in taped messages of support. Rex came in behind them with the iron serpents. 10 men. 10 Harleys outside, gleaming under frost. The same ritual. But today, there was something ceremonial in the way they entered. A closing of a circle. By 7 o'clock, Lena Brooks' article had gone national. The headline wasn't about Senator Graham Pierce anymore. It was about Martha. Waitress humiliated by rich teen exposes senator's veteran fraud. The story spread like wildfire. Morning shows, cable news, veteran advocacy pages, workers' rights groups. And then, just after 9:15 a.m., Gus walked out of the office carrying his laptop. His face looked strange, like a man holding a miracle and trying not to drop it. "Martha." The whole diner went quiet. She turned. "What is it?" Gus slowly set the laptop on the counter and turned the screen toward her. A fundraising page, started overnight by a veteran nurse in Casper. Title: Help Martha Cole Retire with Dignity. The number on the screen made her knees nearly buckle. $2,460,000. Martha stared, didn't blink, didn't breathe. Because after a life of choosing between medication and groceries, the number might as well have been written in another language. Eli leaned over the counter and gasped. "Grandma, is that real?" Her voice came out broken. I don't know." Lana, who had just arrived from Cheyenne, checked the verified campaign badge. "It's real." And then the donations kept climbing. $2.5 million, 2.7, 2.9. The country had decided Martha Cole was no longer allowed to survive. Now she was going to live. The whole diner erupted. Truckers clapping, veterans cheering, Mrs. Green crying into a napkin, Gus wiping his eyes and pretending it was grill smoke. Even Boone let out a rough laugh from table 7. Martha sat down hard on the nearest stool. For the first time in decades, the future no longer looked like another shift. Landon stood beside her. Silent, because there was no sentence big enough for this moment. No apology, no redemption speech. Just the overwhelming truth that one act of cruelty had accidentally forced open an entire hidden world. And the world had chosen to answer with grace. By noon, the Attorney General announced full criminal proceedings against Graham Pierce. Federal prosecutors added charges. VIA corruption task forces reopened 6 years of denied rural treatment claims. Hundreds of veterans would now get restored benefits. Dozens of widows like Martha were contacted by state legal aid teams. The ripple effect had become a tidal wave. By 4 p.m., the Silver Pine staff closed the diner early. For the first time in 33 years, Martha was not closing because of snow, loss, or fear. She was closing for something else, a private dinner. Just family. the chosen kind. That night, the lights stayed warm and low. Only one table was set. Table 7, the Iron Serpent's table. Rex at the head, Martha beside him, Eli between Landon and Gus. Lena joined too. Even Harold Vance came quietly and took the end seat near the window. The meal was simple: pot roast, mashed potatoes, peach pie. But every plate carried something heavier than food: closure. Rex lifted his coffee mug, a toast. To Jean. The room fell still. His mother. The waitress no one had protected. Then he looked at Martha. To Thomas, her husband. Then to Harold. To Ethan, the son Landon helped break. Then finally he looked at Landon. Long, steady. And to the people who prove pain doesn't have to reproduce itself. No one spoke for a second, because that was the whole story, wasn't it? Cruelty passed forward until someone finally decided to stop carrying it. Landon swallowed hard. The boy who had walked into Silver Pine believing power meant domination no longer existed. In his place sat someone still unfinished, still guilty, still learning. But real. After dinner, Martha asked him to walk her outside. The Wyoming night was cold and clear. Stars scattered hard above the empty road. The Harleys gleamed under the parking lot lights. They stood beside her old Taurus, still patched together by Boone and Mace, still alive, like everything else here. Martha folded her arms against the cold. So what happens to you now? Landon looked back through the diner window, at Eli laughing with Rex, at the Iron Serpents, at Gus wiping down counters one last time tonight. At first I thought I'd go back to my old life. He shook his head. Now I don't think that life exists anymore. Martha smiled softly. Good. He looked at her. I transferred. She frowned. Transferred? University of Wyoming. Social work program. Her eyes widened. Landon exhaled. I want to work with veteran family outreach, rural communities, kids, people the system keeps missing. For the first time, Martha reached out and squeezed his hand, her fingers still rough from decades of work, still trembling slightly, but warm. Then this meant something. He looked down at her hand, at the same hand he once degraded. Now the hand that had helped rebuild him. It meant everything. 6 months later, Silver Pine Diner reopened under new ownership. Not a chain, not a developer, not some polished corporate brand, a community cooperative. Veterans, teachers, ranchers, and townspeople all pooled money from the fundraiser overflow Martha insisted she didn't need. Gus finally retired. Eli got his own booth corner for homework. Mrs. Green still came every Thursday, Harold Vance every Tuesday. And at the center of the room, permanently mounted beside table 7, hung a brass plaque. Jean's table. No worker stands alone here. Every Thursday morning, 10 Harleys still rolled into the parking lot. The Iron Serpents never missed. Only now there was an 11th bike. Black. Clean. Still newer than the others. Parked at the far end of the line. Landon's. Not because he had become one of them. Not officially. But because every family built by honor eventually leaves space for the people willing to earn their place. Inside, Martha no longer worked shifts. She visited, coffee in hand, no uniform, no pain hidden behind smiles. Just peace. One Thursday morning, she sat beside Rex at table 7 and watched Landon help Eli with fractions at booth 3. The boy laughed. Landon laughed too. Easy now. honest. Martha leaned back and let the warmth of the diner settle into her bones. For the first time in 33 years, tomorrow no longer frightened her. Rex looked at her. "You okay?" She smiled. A real one. The kind that costs nothing because life has finally stopped charging interest. "Yeah." She looked around the diner, at the people, the plaque, the Harleys outside. The boy who had once spit in her face now helping her grandson with homework. The family built from consequences and choice. Then she said the final truth this whole story had been moving toward. Sometimes the worst thing that ever happens to you becomes the first good thing for everyone else. Outside, the Harleys gleamed in the Wyoming sun. Inside, coffee steamed. And for the first time, Martha Cole was finally the end.